the right.
I'll be home for Christmas. You can plan
Those big cons are gonna love you.
me. Please have snow and mistletoe and presents
I wasn't ready for that.
on the tree.
Brett Pullman, who is just an absolute heavyweight on this issue, the executive director of the Right on Crime, has been elucidating for us which rules the Department of Justice is breaking. Brett Pullman, who's a former U.S. attorney, government reformer, proud Cherokee, didn't know that, and weekend cowboy, according to his Twitter bio, has been digging through the Department of Justice, which apparently he used to work at, and has been saying, yo, you are literally breaking your own rules and going after Hunter Biden. This is the most degenerate hose job that I've ever seen. And Brett Pullman is right. He's bringing the receipts to the show right now. Ladies and gentlemen, joining us, the great Brett Pullman. I didn't know that you were part Cherokee.
Very, very proud. On my mother's side.
Wow.
Yep. So I have a bit of American history running deep in our genealogy.
Hey man, well, fantastic. Well, let's get into the fight here then. Okay, let's go.
Let's do it. Thanks for having me on, Benny.
This is a great one here. This tweet from you last week. I mean, it went thermonuclear, but like this pretrial diversion for the firearm for Hunter Biden. This is clearly against the DOJ policy to give him pretrial diversion here. You brought the receipts up in a tweet last week, but I wanted to talk to you about it. Like, how do they get away with this?
Yeah, Benny, let me just say it's so offensive having, been in the criminal justice system, working in it for 25 years now, and knowing exactly what DOJ has done. Let me just put it in perspective. I went back through and looked at 189,000 different possession cases that the department has brought over the last couple of decades. I could not find one single diversion, not a single diversion in 189,000 illegal possession of firearms cases. That should give people a perspective.
189,000?
189,000. That's from DOJ's own data. So I used their data. We dug into it. We looked at these cases because I heard all these pundits saying, this is a normal resolution of a case. It is not normal. I personally presented hundreds of cases, firearms cases, to the grand jury. I was not able to offer a diversion in any one of those cases. And the reason is, Benny, because the Department of Justice made a long time ago with a program called Project Safe Neighborhoods. They made it a rule that they were going to enforce gun cases strictly. And it's DOJ wide. So every U.S. attorney had to follow and toe the line. That includes the U.S. attorney in Delaware. That includes the U.S. attorney in Utah, where I was. We all had to bring these cases, and the average sentence of anyone like Hunter Biden is about 39 months in federal prison just on a possession of a firearm case.
So, unlike a lot of people like myself, who has never worked inside of the Department of Justice, we can just simply speculate here. And there's an enormous amount of psyoping going on right now with MSNBC. Everyone's saying, as you just mentioned, no, they're going hard after Hunter here. Actually, right? That was the line. That was the line when this plea agreement was struck. Oh, wow, they dropped the hammer on Hunter. You've actually done the work. Unlike a lot of these blowhards and airheads and clowns, you've actually done the work in trial. You've worked for the Department of Justice. What is your takeaway here from this plea agreement?
Benny, my very first case was a user and possession case like Hunter Biden's. I took it to trial. That guy got almost 10 years in federal prison. So, yeah, I've been in the trenches. It's offensive, but to put a perspective on this, Joe Biden made statements that he was going to be tough on gun crime. So much so that Joe Biden signed a bill into law while I was a prosecutor. The most you could get for a possession of a firearm, illegal possession of a firearm case, was 10 years. Joe Biden signed a law that expanded the limit on the sentence to 15 years. So at the same time, he's telling people he's going to be tough on crime. At the same time, the Department of Justice, and they have what's called the Ashcroft and the Holder memos. These are policy rules that the Department of Justice has to follow. And Holder said it, and so did Ashcroft, said we must always charge the highest provable offense. Well, they're violating that policy. They're violating the Holder policy. They're violating Joe Biden's tough on gun crime edict. And in context, just to bring everybody into why I'm so angry at this and offended, and why many of my colleagues are, is the possession of the firearm case is always the leverage case. That's the leverage charge, the one you use to get to the scope of a conspiracy. What we have right now is massive amount of evidence against conspirators, the Bidens, Joe Biden, his brother, his son, the business partners, the family members, those that set up 12 LLCs in order to funnel all this money. What we would have done, and we were told to do, is to hold the leverage of the gun crime over the head of a target, and then put them in front of the grand jury, or debrief them and expand your evidence on the real underlying crime. The real underlying crime here is a massive fraud that we have so much evidence of, Benny. Just to sort of reveal what would happen in this case, we would approach the grand jury. We would present to 26 individuals, and we would get a unanimous charge back from a grand jury on racketeering, probably, on conspiracy to money launder, on money laundering, on wire fraud, mail fraud, and we would include everybody. And the amount of time that people would be serving in prison for what we now know is authenticated evidence on the laptop and from whistleblowers is most likely the rest of their lives in federal prison.
Really? Can you please put a month number or a year number on that? Like as an expert here.
So if your fraud is over $10 million and you add conspiracy and you have money laundering, so it's just the movement of the illegal money, what we're talking is over 20 years in federal prison for Joe Biden and for Hunter Biden and for any of those that participated. And that doesn't even count the drug crimes, the gun crime that they brought, the tax evasion crime. And so what we're being fed the smallest of cases they could possibly bring in order to get this chapter done and out of our view. And I don't want it to happen. I don't want this to be, thrown under the rug and forgotten, because right now there are thousands of individuals serving long prison sentences who committed far less serious crimes than Hunter Biden. And in fact, if you want to go so far, this is akin to, it's offensive for what we saw, Project Safe Neighborhoods going after the gun crime, hit the inner cities of our country harder than anything else. So if you were an African-American in Detroit and you got hit with a felon in possession or a user in possession case, you think they were going to offer a pretrial diversion to that guy?
It doesn't matter
a chance.
You could be a platinum rapper, and they go hard for you. Lil Wayne is one of the most successful, arguably one of the most famous rappers living today, Lil Wayne.
That's right.
And that guy did hard time. Same with Kodak Black.
I brought a case, Benny, of an illegal possession of a firearm case, and all he had was a single round of ammunition. In the federal system, ammo is just as restricted as a firearm. and if you're a felon or if you're a user. And this was a guy that they thought was dealing drugs, and so we stepped up and we charged him with possession of that single round of ammo. And guess what? He did over 4 years in federal prison.
Wow.
So how big of a sweetheart deal is this? It is the most outrageous thing I've ever seen. And it's the audacity to do it right in our face when we see what's going on in the laptop and the evidence of that. So they took 5 years to bring two of the simplest charges you could ever bring, that I could have wrapped up all the evidence in about a day and a half and presented it to the grand jury and had it done in 3 days. But they didn't, because there's far more and it's far deeper than what they brought. I'm shocked at the tax cases as well, because anybody that's ever been charged on millions of dollars they received and didn't pay taxes for, the department's default position is a felony. So they're violating their own internal policies everywhere, but they're violating the history and the precedent that they set in bringing these kinds of charges. And if the U.S. Attorney Weiss has claimed that his hands were somewhat tied. He wasn't able to be appointed as special prosecutor so that he had, wider jurisdiction. I'm sorry, I don't buy it. And the reason I don't buy it, Benny, is because the U.S. Attorney cannot be fired by the Attorney General. He has separate confirmation by the United States Senate, and he is nominated by the president and has the exact same authority as the Attorney General. And so if he wanted to, he could have presented any case that he wanted to a grand jury, and he could have pursued this and it wouldn't have mattered. But instead, he was willing to play ball, join the team Garland, and push out charges that anybody that's been in DOJ knows is an outright fraud in terms of DOJ's consistency and their willingness to prosecute these kinds of cases.
Now McCarthy was on this morning saying they're going to bring in Weiss, they're going to depose him, and then they're going to impeach Garland. Let's talk through that. Merrick Garland impeachment. Can you game theory that for us, please?
Yeah, I can. I mean, the real issue there is, was there interference? And as it appears, if you look at some of what the whistleblowers have brought out, there appears to be clear indication from an assistant U.S. attorney who was on the case to refuse to present evidence, to authorize a search warrant. And it's very possible that they gave a heads up to Hunter Biden when they did get a search warrant of a storage unit so that his lawyers could go in and remove evidence before it was searched. So the question's going to be, if the whistleblowers are accurate, and it appears that DOJ was interfering in what the agents wanted to do and the scope of the investigation, whether Garland had a role personally in that or not, it is his Department of Justice, and it was very clear that the assistant U.S. attorney and the U.S. attorney were operating on some basis to either stall, delay, or outright obstruct the case against the Bidens, and that deserves impeachment.
The piece of bombshell evidence that I just want to touch here in this interview, because it's really important, it's obviously been rocketing around the internet, is this WhatsApp text from Hunter Biden that even Hunter Biden's lawyer says is authentic and real. Hunter Biden was on drugs, you see, when he was talking about this mafia tactics with his father. And I would like to know from you and your professional experience, does that argument stand up? Oh, my client was on drugs when he was extorting the Chinese.
Benny, some of the best evidence I ever got was from when, the sloppiness that comes as a result of someone's lifestyle. And so this is in line and consistent with what we saw on the laptop. Hunter was fantastic at documenting his crimes. And he was, if you wanted to handpick sort of the worst possible person to be in the middle of a conspiracy to enrich the Biden family, and Joe Biden included, it would be somebody on drugs that is reckless and their life is spinning out of control. So I don't buy it, but I will say this. I believe Joe Biden this is a bombshell. It truly is. We often hear that, but I believe this text is a bombshell because there's allegations that Joe Biden was receiving the money. And if that's accurate, and now we've now made the connection between a communication to those they're shaking down in a pay-to-play scheme, we now have the other side of that. So you often have the quid or the quo, but you don't have both of them. And that's the difficulty in bringing a case like this. But now we have both. And it doesn't matter if he's in the room or not, because if you follow the money and it goes into Joe Biden's account or ultimately it is used by Joe Biden at some point, then you have your case and you have grounds for impeachment and you have grounds for criminal prosecution. Ironically, this is really criminal behavior that's worthy of an indictment against a president.
Wow. I mean, this is absolutely bombshell stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're not following Brett Pullman on Twitter, you've got to get over and follow him. I do have one follow-up question to that. Ladies and gentlemen, you would hear this from his Twitter account, 25,000 followers, 25,000 people can't be wrong. Let's get him up to 100,000. The Benny Brigade, come through, follow Brett Pullman, one of the best lawyers in the country. You must, for me right now, please, game theory out. You don't even have to use the name Joe Biden. But game theory out, what would you do to a guy in Joe Biden's position, given the evidence that is currently on the table? What would you do to him as a former U.S. attorney?
So first thing is you have to do what's called sourcing. And sourcing is a type of investigation in which you seize from all kinds of third parties. So banks, emails, all that. You seize all of the evidence you can without having to rely on the targets themselves. And then you put together a source document which shows where the money is moved. And then you match it up to the allegations of Bobulinski, and you match it up to the information in the texts and the emails, and you start to actually portray the crime syndicate that this is. And the reason why it's so important that the feds, that they should be doing this, is they're the ones that have the resources and the talent to actually pursue worldwide all the evidence that they need and to put it together and to show it. A state prosecutor doesn't have those resources. The feds do, and they do it all the time. I mean, look at what they did to Sam Bankman-Fried. I mean, they know how to do it when they're motivated to do it. So what I would do, Benny, is I would start with sourcing. I would then put all that evidence together, and then I would one by one start calling in all of the peripheral conspirators. So your family members that are willing to talk in front of the grand jury, business partners, bankers, anybody that has evidence, and I'd put all of them in front of the grand jury and lock down all their testimony. And then I would request the grand jury to vote on the crime syndicate that you now have put together. This is as large a scale of a crime syndicate as many of your mafia prosecutions that we saw. They set up dummy corporations. They funnel millions of dollars. They pull in those dollars from unnamed sources or from criminal activity. Then they disperse it, and they disperse it widely, so it's not easy to track. But in the end, you present that to the grand jury, and that case is simple in its essence, and that is you were using Joe Biden as a front man to get millions of dollars from countries who needed the United States to act in a certain way on a particular issue. At that point, you indict the sitting president for conduct prior to becoming president, and you also use that evidence for impeachment while he sits in office.
Wow. And you said, I know you're an important man, and time is of the essence, but I don't want to make you repeat yourself. You said that Joe Biden, if properly charged, would be spending the rest of his life in prison?
Yeah, the level of fraud in the federal system, it's not the amount you stole, it's the amount you intended to steal. So if they only got 10 million, but they were hoping to get 20 or 30 or 40 or however many millions they were trying to shake down people, that adds up in the federal system. The more dollars you have in your intended fraud, adds years to your sentence. So I'm aware, for example, of an individual who was accused of stealing $20 million, and he got a 23-year sentence. in federal prison.
Wow.
So if you add on top of that other crimes that may be part of it, you're looking at the fact that an 83-year-old man in Joe Biden, if he's at the center of this conspiracy, he would serve the rest of his life in prison if DOJ did what they have done to every other defendant that they have investigated with similar crimes. The full weight of the Department of Justice and the criminal justice system in this country should come down like a hammer if they are consistent with what they have done in prior cases. It should come down like a hammer on the Bidens. And I'll just say last thing on this, Benny. There's a plaque inside the Department of Justice that says that the hallmark of justice. Let me. How does this go? The hallmark of fairness in the administration of justice is consistency. And that is a massive plaque when you walk into the halls of the Department of Justice. And I cannot think of anything more offensive than what they've done on this case compared to all other cases in which individuals are serving decades in federal prison for similar crimes.
Yeah. I mean, it is an affront and an open insult to every single American. We try as hard as we can not to black pill people on the show, not to be doomers. And it's easy to scream at the sun and scream at the clouds and shout at the clouds and yell about stuff that we don't have control over. We do have control over Congress. Final question. How do you think McCarthy's doing? With these announcements, the impeachment inquiries and the pressure that oversight is putting on this regime, the Ukrainian oligarchs said it'd take 10 years to uncover the network, and it's taken oversight 6 months. And they got some bangers. They got some ringers here. And the Bidens are clearly in panic. They were in Camp David this weekend with Hunter. They got some problems. Can you give us a little bit of hope? Can you give us like a little bit, like what's our silver lining here as it pertains to Congress's inquiry?
Yeah, the silver lining is definitely what the House has done. They're not perfect by any means, but they don't have perfect rules that would help them uncover this more quickly. But we would not have the legitimacy of the investigation we have without McCarthy and what he decided to do. And it's given, courage. Many that saw this and were up close and personal to it, like the whistleblowers. To give you a perspective, it is rare. And I know of no other prior whistleblowers that were agents on an investigation or in the Department of Justice. It is a culture that will come down hard on individuals who try to reveal misconduct. And so for what the silver lining I would tell people is, look at what we have uncovered and are forcing mainstream media to now look at. We are forcing the conversation, and we are encouraging whistleblowers, and I think more will come out. Mm-hmm. And they'll start to see the legitimacy of the evidence on the laptop, the evidence from co-conspirators. And so my hope is that it not only leads to an impeachment of this president, but an unraveling and an absolute destruction of a crime syndicate in the Biden family.
Wow. Just wow. Ladies and gentlemen, Brett Pullman is one of the good guys. He's worked inside the Department of Justice. He runs an incredible organization called Right on Crime, and he's the executive director of it. You got to get over and follow him on Twitter. We got to put up the Twitter account one more time. My executive producer is telling me that your following is now spiking, and so that's good. Ladies and gentlemen, 100,000. Come on. We got to get Brett. The more power that we give to the voices of the people who are actually fighting for us, the better our country will be. Brett is a heavyweight. Let's make sure he's one on Twitter. And Right on Crime, a wonderful organization. Mr. Tolman, thank you so much for being on the program. I'm sure these clips are going to go thermonuclear. These are you brought it today, man.
Yeah, we brought it. It needs to be brought. I hope everybody will start to do the same. Let's not ever let the Department of Justice forget how important this case is. It's far more important than 2 misdemeanors and a diversion.
Yes. Thank you for speaking truth. We need it now more than ever. The great Brett Tolman.
Thanks for having me, Benny.
Thank you.